It was the summer of '69. Oh yeah, standing on your mama's porch. He told me that it would last forever. Those were the best days of my life. What exactly happened in the summer of '69? The summer of '69 was the year of the Woodstock.
3, 2, 1.
It was the year that the troops withdrawn from the Vietnam War. It was the beginning of the skateboard craze. It was just 3 years after that big surf movie, The Endless Summer. It was premiered, and it was a big surf craze in Huntington Beach and in Newport Beach. June 20th, 1969 was a very famous day. It was the opening of Speedway. However, that wasn't the biggest event of June 20th, 1969. The biggest event was the Apollo 11 moon landing. That was June 20th, 1969. So while man was making his first steps on the moon, there was Speedway at the Costa Mesa Fairgrounds. June 20th, 1969 was the opening of the Orange County Fairgrounds. It was with Jack Milne, the 1937 world champion, and Harry Oxley. They opened up the Costa Mesa Speedway. On that beautiful summer night on June 20th, the opening program was listed with some stars like Sonny Nutter, woo! Steve Bast, Rick Woods, Wild Bill Cody, Jim Gresham, Big Mike Conley, Bruce and Greg Hazeroth. There was Swede Savage. He had passed away a few years later in an Indianapolis 500 car accident. Also on the program on that opening night was the grandfather of a current Speedway Division I brother team, Reese and Renton Todd. It was his grandpa, Bill Todd, was on that opening night program. Bill was a good rider, and he actually passed away, rest in peace, in a boat accident a few years later. The opening night scorekeeper at the Costa Mesa Fairgrounds was Janine Rocio. Janine was like my mother. She was the wife of Johnny Rocio, the Speedway rider. And Johnny's brother was Ernie Rocio, who died in the 1952 Speedway accident at West Ham Speedway. Also, the first announcers at the Costa Mesa Fairgrounds was the legendary Bruce Flenders. Rest in peace, Bruce. And his co-partner, they had a co-partner back at the time, it was Pee Wee Cullum. Now, Pee Wee Cullum was an early day Speedway rider, and he must have been small. Why? Because his name was Pee Wee. Back in those days, in the early days, they used to name the riders according to the physical characteristics. Like Pee Wee is small, and Sprouts Elder was tall because he was sprouting. The rules were made by the International Speedway Association. And the rule was the referee was in complete charge of the races. There was a disqualification for dirty riding or jumping the start. There was a complete restart if half the field went down in the first turn. The riders had 2 minutes to get their bikes going. If they couldn't get their bikes going in 2 minutes, they had a reserve rider to take his place. However, there's no need for a reserve rider in the semi-event or the main event. You couldn't have a reserve rider. You notice I said Steve Bass was on the program, but there was no Mike Bass. Why? Because the Bass brothers lived over in the desert by Whiteman Stadium, about 15 miles from Whiteman. It was in the desert area, and they didn't know if it was going to pay very good in Costa Mesa. So I guess it was Steve came out and he raced, and then they wanted to test out the Costa Mesa Fairgrounds to see how it was. And then Steve must have went home with a boatload of money the opening night, and Mike said, "I'm coming to race at Costa Mesa." Opening night was fantastic. There were so many people coming to the Costa Mesa Speedway. They had 2,000 stands for seating, and it was full of people, and there was standing room only. So many people went to the Costa Mesa Fairgrounds that Jack Milne's company had to build an extra 1,000 seats here on the bleachers. So now there was 3,000 seats for people to sit, and guess what? It was full. His company had to continue to increase those stands, those seating areas, and it eventually ended up to 6,500 spectators coming and packing the Costa Mesa Bull Ring. The Costa Mesa Fairgrounds was open every Friday night for many years, and it was before the internet. The teenagers were looking for something to do, and they went to the Speedway every Friday night. And there was beautiful ladies that went to the races every Friday night, and the guys followed. The guys were on the stands watching the girls down by the crash wall walking down, the beautiful women. They were hooting and hollering. They sold beer at the Speedway, and somehow those teenagers got a hold of a lot of beer, and they kept drinking that beer, and the women looked a lot more beautiful when they had a few beers. And then when the teenagers had a lot of beers, there was a lot of fights, beer and fights. And there was a fight over there, and then there was a fight over there. There was fights in the stands during the intermission when there was no Speedway races. Speedway took on a three-ring circus atmosphere. You had the Speedway races, those exciting fuel, methanol fuel-burning rockets. Then you had fights in the stands. You had the chicks walking around. Costa Mesa was the happening place. And then you had that aroma, that beautiful aroma of the castor oil from those exhaust pipes. It filled the air. It was so beautiful. And everyone just loved the smell of the castor oil. And I guess the DG was cheaper back in those days, the dirt. Because why? They had lots of dirt on the outside. Costa Mesa Speedway had deep, thick cushion of dirt in the entire 70s, and it made for exciting riding. Woo! During the intermission, when they dragged the track, the kids would jump the fences and they would grab those tear-offs. Why? Because when the races started, the kids would put those tear-offs in front of their eyes, they would get close to the track, and they would have the mud hit them in the face as they're watching the Speedway races. And if you're drinking Coke or a beer, that mud would fly in about the first 5 or 6 rows of the stadium. And guess what? When you went to drink your Coke or your beer, it was full of mud. It was the summer of '69, a blast from the past. Riders were really good, and there was lots of money coming in the gates. The Speedway riders were getting pretty rich if they won those races. And it was just a wonderful and it was a glorious time in Speedway. The summer of '69 was the beginning of one of the most incredible eras in the modern day Speedway history.